Well, you saw last go around, we were able to remove that rocker panel from the rusty shell of a 1968 Firebird convertible. So you know how to get the silly thing out, but of course now the next question is how do you get that thing back in there? That's what we're going to get into here today. Now you saw the previous video. There were some things that we did to get that out to make it a little bit easier because we're going to be replacing a lot of the other sheet metal on this car. Again, if your car wasn't an old rusty, crusty bird like this thing, you may be a little more delicate, but we don't need to be. We're going to be replacing most of this metal, but I don't like cutting the entire car apart because, again, you don't see a frame table or a a body jig or a big chunk of steel to set this thing on and build it up from the floor. So what I like to do is do like 1 or 2 pieces at a time so I can keep checking measurements, checking if things have moved, or in the case of like this car, it's kind of settled and kind of rusted, so I'm going to pull it back in tighter so I don't have it braced together so that I can control the gaps, the alignment, and how it's going to look when it's done. Now, of course, that creates a lot more chaos in a sense of you've got to be continuously checking measurements, inspecting gaps. That's why you see the door on the car. So I wanted to get on my soapbox about that because I'm sure someone out there is going to say, what the heck? There's no bracing on that car. It's surely going to be a piece of junk when it's done. I assure you that answer is no, only because of the time spent continuously remeasuring, using ratchet straps. You'll see as this car comes back together, ratchet straps are going to be your best friend to pull this thing back into shape. Because when I pop that floor panel, loose from that rocker panel, the car is separated by almost a ½ an inch on each side. So I got to pull those back in somehow. You'll see that. I promise it'll work just fine. So again, don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends and tell everybody how crazy this guy is here in his garage building these cars, right? Well, it's going to make it happen. We're going to do this. It's car number 5. So I think we're doing pretty good. Anyway, rambled on enough about that. Now let's talk about getting that rocker panel put back where it belongs. Okay, I swept up about 50 pounds of dirt, threw it in that box there. So again, if you'd like to buy a 68 Fire Dirt Bird, let me know. I'd make you a great deal on that. Now, I've got things cleaned up. Now, I decided that I didn't want to cut that flange out. You can see it has some rust holes in it. It looked good until you started taking it apart, and it was just real flimsy, this bottom flange down here. So what I'm going to do, I decided not to replace that. That's at the height and everything where I need it, and even I can then gauge where it goes back in. So I'm going to put the rocker panel in and test fit it, and then replace that section afterwards. And it's a little bit backwards, but I think it's going to be a better way to go on this car. Then as for the front goes, I've determined this brace here in really nice shape, solid, not going anywhere. So again, not going to fabricate or replace it. We're going to put some chemicals on it to keep it from rusting any further. And that was about it. And I cleaned up some of the edges here and everything. So I think what we need to do next, though, is get this rocker panel prepped. Now, I didn't remove this piece because you can still see it's on the car right here. Here's that triangular opening, and that's the mount bolt flange, whatever, for the fender. Kind of a triangular opening. There's this. So I won't need this on here, so I need to cut that off. Now, I cut it just above the radius here, straight over towards this circle, then straight down. I'll have to drill out these 2 spot welds, leave this piece intact, and just cut that outer skin. So it'll be straight across, and then kind of down here, and it cuts right into back here. So I'll work on getting these 2 spot welds drilled out. I'll draw up the line and show you how to cut this out. Got it marked out. The old line here's where we're going to cut it at. Cut it, flip it over this way, and we'll cut that really straight line. See how perfectly straight that is? No, actually it's kind of rough. I just want to go from that corner to about here, and that's okay if I got a little bit of a gap. I guess I've always said someplace for the wire to go, weld that back together. And I was making an observation. I talked about the last go around. The door, as soon as I cut it apart, she sagged. She's a little bit low, so I decided to give myself a hand. I just welded a little washer on that thing there to hold the height. And that holds this at the correct measurement as I put everything back together. And when I'm done, just buzz that off. That won't hurt a thing. So made that little thing there right quick and seemed to help out a whole lot as for the alignment. So I'm going to get that thing cut off next. Got it trimmed back there. 2 spot welds drilled out. So throw that off to the side. I got some plans for that piece, but we'll show you that later on. But next thing now, do yourself a favor, get a floor jack. This thing is heavy. It's awkward. It's a pain in the butt. Put that on the floor jack and then lift it up into place. Floor jacks will make life a little easier. This front edge actually needs to be tucked up first because it's going to go up into that kick panel area. So I'm going to tuck that side up just a little bit before the back. Then I should be able to lift it up into place. At least that's my goal. front of it tucked up in here. Okay, now, hopefully, hey, done. Ta-da! Just like that. She's installed. Well, not too bad for the first go. Kind of a quick test fit there, but liking the looks so far. I do have a little malfunction up here in the front. Put a clamp on it there. Look at the gap between the rocker panel and floor pan. I expected that. That's pretty common. Like I said, we'll be using some ratchet straps to pull that back in. Back's lining up pretty good. Front is coming into measurement like it should. Find my Stanley here. Old Stanley, he's going to take care of things for us. Now, we had made notes here. 4 1/4, well, that's missing that piece now. I can't measure that anymore, but I can go from here to the leading edge of the rocker panel here, and we know it should be 15 1/8. So let's just see how we fare. Looks like 15 1/4, but it actually lines up pretty good with the door. So you know what? I'm going to let that fly. The only thing I don't like is when I cut this, the gap is a little wider than I anticipated. And I couldn't figure out there for the life of me what actually had happened, but the truth be told, when they assembled the rocker panel either from the factory or this replacement one, not everything's not exactly 100% in sequence. That piece there is actually shifted further back than mine on this car here. The factory or vice versa. One of the two, they ain't correlating, because normally this lines up really nice. It's got a bit of a jog to it. So, not sure what I'm going to do. The driver's side worked out really good. This side, maybe that's the difference between AMD and OER, right? Well, maybe the OER has a little defect and they just shipped it out the door. I measured it. It didn't seem out of whack, but yeah, whatever. We'll have to do, cut this, notch it, cut it, notch it. I'll get it all to line up. I have to work a little bit of hammer, but this is where I want it at. So I am not going to cut anything else apart, move it, but even my door gap. Look at this, nice and even front to back. So I like that. Checked it to the floor, it's great. My depth of my quarter panel, this here sits in just a little further because the skin comes underneath it and ties underneath it, goes into place. This brace needs some work, but it goes where it needs to go. And even the quarter panel will line up there with the rocker panel. So I'm gonna call that where it needs to be. I'm gonna drop this down, put some rust converter, whatever primer up in here to keep it from getting worse, or ideally I guess you could sandblast that, but it makes one heck of a mess. So we're just going to chemically treat all of this here, and even the little front brace here lines up really nice. It pulled up tight to the rocker panel, so that's looking really good. So like I said, a little rust converter rattle can action here, but other than that, looking really good. That's going to go in and work out just fine. A little wire brush action, clean the rust and scale up there, hit it with a little bit of the Rust-Oleum Rust Reformer. And the areas I plan to weld, self-etching weld through primer. That's all. Wait for that to dry for a few more minutes. Did the same thing back here. Stripped all the EDP and the stickers off the top of that rocker panel. There was the made in Taiwan, fits everything kind of sticker and all that stuff. Took that off with the wire brush. I thought maybe put a little something on there. So it's all cleaned up. I'm going to lift this back up into place for the last time. And we're only going to screw the back section in for now, just so I have some adjustability. I put a handful of screws in that. So I won't be replacing that bottom flange yet, but the front, I think we can go ahead and get it welded into place. Needs to go forward some. That should it. Put a couple sub tappers in it for now. got one here in the front, I think. Back in there, I hope. See how that pulled up really tight now? And I got some icy grips here. Okay, now I'll do a couple of beads of weld there. And I got to stitch weld that big old gap in. But that's just what it's going to be. But I can get that shut no problem whatsoever. So we'll go ahead and get doing that.
He's restored a Pontiac or two, and he's been known to drink a big orange dew. Just a working man trying to save the world. One Firebird.
All right, weld a couple spots there. Burned my big gap shut there. Not the most beautiful weld, but let's just call it what it is. It's going to work. Weld up where I stitched up there. Now we need to go here to the inside and work on getting that doctored up and welded back together too. That gets us all the structure we need back in the front here. All right, do I think it's the most beautiful job? No, not really, but it's going to work. All welded back together, that's good. At this point now, I'm not going to weld the rear section. I put some screws in it for now. I'm going to leave it where I have some adjustment in case I want to fiddle with it. And if I don't, I'll leave those just right where they're at and we'll start plug welding it into place. And again, this lower flange, by the time I started drilling and taking it apart, it just crumbled, unfortunately. But my plots are, is once I start getting some of the structure back in the car, I'll cut this out, weld a piece into there, and then spot weld it there to the rocker panel. So there you have it, rocker panel installed 90, maybe 70% of the way here. The front's all pretty much welded minus the floor pan. But the thing that's important is our body lines line up, top of the doors line up, and the bottom gap on my rocker panel is set. Like I said, I put that door on before we cut the old rocker panel out. So that way I could put the new rocker panel in position matching the door. Now my measurements were good, 15 1/8 there in the front. That's okay. From the floor up was 15 and 15, so we're nice and level still. So the car at this point should be nice and square. I'm going to go ahead and drop my tape measure from my line here back there to the seat belt. Make sure it still reads 58 3/4. If it does, I think we're off to a really good start. There it goes. Now, so I just kind of laid the tape measure on about the center of that seatbelt bolt. Yeah, come on now. And right where that line is at, okay, it's a 1/16 shorter than it was to begin with, but 58 3/4 is what it's supposed to be. Not bad. I think we did really good. That's going to hold up and work out just fine. It's less than an 1/8 inch difference than it was and matches the other side. So there you have it. Rocker panel installed, driver's side rocker panel installed. Let's call it what it is. They're not 100% installed, but they're in there for what we need for now. The front corners are all welded in, besides what I'm going to have to add for new sheet metal. I put the cowling on, I put the toe board, the torque box. There's a little convertible brace, and of course the floor pan. Get that all sandwiched in. That thing is 100% ready to rock in the front corners. On level, my datum line is good. So right now I've got a nice square box that I'm building right now. My rocker panel is going to be the foundation for everything else that I do from this point. So speaking of that, you guys saw the videos or gals, like we need to be fair here. We're going to start working on the toe board. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this whole center section of that floor out and drop it. I won't leave the rear seat section in for now, but I'm going to cut the front half or 2/3 of the main floor pan out of the way so that we can get into doing the toe boards, torque boxes, and get it prepped to put the floor pan. Once those are squared away, the firewall's fixed, then we'll proceed with cutting the rest of this rear floor pan out. So that's the progress. That's what we're going to keep working towards. Of course, that's going to be a video for a different day because I am done. But I am feeling really accomplished. Rocker panels are done. That's one of probably the most complicated parts because you're cutting a lot of the structure out, especially on a convertible. It gets a little sketchy, but hey, gaps are looking right. Things are measuring out good. That's why we take the measurements, why we use our virtual floor or the datum line, making this thing happen. So you don't want to miss the rest of the old build of the Lamborghini. So don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to try to do every video for at least on every Friday is my goal. I'm going to try to get back to maybe 2-week Wednesdays and Fridays. We'll see. Hopefully weather permitting. I got my house chores I'm doing too, remodeling the house a little bit. So, but anyway, I rambled on enough. I'm going to grab the camera. What the next step is here. Hope to see you all then.
Save them birds. 'Cause in the Vinyl Village garage, they're building cars that look so fine. A man named John built a Firebird 67s, 8s, and 9s.